Welcome into Studio A. I'm Maria Trivelpiece alongside Kyle Youmans for our sad final football show of the year.
Sad?
I'm sad that it's over.
I'm sad that it's over too, but guess what? That's not anything sad to talk about. Do you see the way that the American Conference took over the college football world by storm?
The Bowl Challenge Cup champions, the American Athletic Conference.
Representing the A, baby. How about that? I didn't even know there was a Bowl Challenge Cup. I'm going to be completely honest with you. But the fact that we're champions of it, that's exciting. And 6-2, that's the best record by far. No one was even close. Not the SEC, not the Big 12, not the ACC, not the Pac-12. Of course, they've got two teams, and I don't think either one of them made a bowl game. So there's a lot to talk about in the fact that you ended up with 6-2 across the board. How cool is that?
Well, I also was not totally aware of the Bowl Cup Challenge, but I did research on it. Since 2002 it's been going on, and I think one thing that you mentioned is the fact that not only did we go 6-2, we also beat a variety of different conferences. So there are wins against the SEC, there's wins against just all these other conference opponents, and so I think that says a lot about the way that the American Conference finished their football season.
Well, when we wrapped up the regular season and we were going into the postseason on All-American about a month ago, we were talking about how exciting it was to have 8 teams represented in postseason action. And in this day and age of college football and NIL and transfer portal, there's always uncertainty from conference to conference how things line up. And yes, I know the transfer portal plays a significant factor in a lot of these postseason games. That's a separate conversation for college football in general. But you play the games that are scheduled and you play with the rosters that you have. And at the end of the day, the score is the score, and the American Conference won 6 of their 8 games. I don't care about any of those other storylines. I see a conference that's underrated across the board and has had some significant jumps over the last few years. They've added some schools from over the last few years, whether it be Independence or Conference USA or some of these other schools that have jumped into the American. They've all had success at the next level, and that postseason record shows exactly the direction that the conference is going. Shout out to all the programs that participated, whether they won or lost in the postseason, but the 6 teams that won it, we're going to talk about it and have some fun with it.
Well, I think one of the big reasons that so many teams did win on the American side was just the way that they played those bowl games. I think that even the teams with players that maybe left, North Texas, we'll talk about them, even though they lost their bowl game, the players that stayed there and fought, I think that's why there were so many victories from the American Conference, because they showed up and they just were so gritty and so much fun to watch. And so let's start with Memphis, because they kicked off our bowl season and they were the first victory for the American, winning the Frisco Bowl. Oh my goodness. And how about the coffee being dumped on Ryan Silverfield right there? That's my favorite part. I want coffee dumped on me.
Absolutely. And throughout the broadcast, they were showing that it was the Scooters Coffee Frisco Bowl, and Memphis was pretty hype with that coffee and the caffeine as they got it done. 42-37 was the final score. This was an awesome game, by the way. Back and forth. Credit to West Virginia, because they never quite went away. You had Seth Hennigan throwing the ball around early. It was a punch, counter-punch sort of game. The way that they finished things out, I mean, even Garrett Green for West Virginia, the quarterback there for the Mountaineers, had a great game. But at the same time, it was all about the team of Memphis. This is a Memphis Tigers team that we've talked about throughout the year. Very experienced, returning some seniors. They've got firepower both on offense and on defense. The offense shined in this game, but the defense forced the turnovers late that made that shining necessary, or possible, that is. So really, it was a fun game to watch. Coach Silverfield had his team ready to go, and you could tell that earlier at Toyota Stadium in Frisco. They came out, made a statement early on, went up by multiple scores, and West Virginia had to play catch-up from that point forward.
I do think West Virginia, though, as you mentioned, did a good job of battling back. And I think when I was looking at some of the post-game things and even the in-game commentary from the broadcasters, was the fact that a lot of those seniors on West Virginia, including Garrett Green, were just like ready to show up and play in that game. And so I think the thing about this bowl game, it was so much fun to watch because both teams gave it their absolute best. And, you know, you think about college football and you're like, well, isn't that what they're supposed to do, right? But in bowl games, sometimes there's a lot of transfers. People aren't playing. And I think that's why this was such a great one to kick off our American Bowl season with, because both teams were just so excited to be there. And I want to talk a little bit about Seth Hennigan, because he just finished off one of the most storied careers in Memphis history, in American Conference history. And you saw how much he cared, how much he wanted to be playing in that game. He's not too far from where that game was played. I loved on the broadcast. They just kept going back to his family in the stands. And I think that that's what college football is supposed to be. One of my favorite things that I saw on Hennigan was just the fact that in his post-game presser, he talked about, look, I stayed at Memphis for 4 years, and he said, I hope that says a lot about me, but I think it should also say about Ryan Silverfield. Like, he believed in me. He recruited me out of high school. And so I think, as we mentioned, all the transfers and the new rosters and this new era of college football, Seth Hennigan set records at Memphis. He set records in the American, and he just went out with a bang in his home state. And I think, talking about storylines, that's a pretty cool one.
Yeah, it really was. They were about 15 miles from Denton, where he grew up. Of course, went to Denton Ryan High School. His dad, Dave Hennigan's been a historic head coach there. So having that close to what is known as one of the best, if not the best, complete career for an American Athletic Conference quarterback is significant. He threw 102 touchdown passes as a quarterback at Memphis Tigers program. I mean, that's all with one program right now. 102 touchdowns is significant. You see guys go off and have incredible seasons. Here's his numbers from that Frisco Bowl win over West Virginia. Sure, you've got those different things, but a lot of times you'll see guys like Jaden Daniels play at Arizona State, go to LSU, have a couple years, win a Heisman, sure. But having 4 straight years with the same program, same head coach, win a ton of games, win some conference championships, win some postseason appearances, it was the perfect way to tie it all together. And I know at the end of the day, Ryan Silverfield, Seth Hennigan and company had college football playoff aspirations. They had American Conference title aspirations, and they didn't necessarily get there. But that doesn't necessarily take away anything from what their career together was. I'm excited to see the way that Silverfield now moves forward in the post-Hennigan era, because they're going to have the opportunity to recruit because of what Seth Hennigan and the groundwork that he and Mario Anderson and some of these other guys for the Memphis Tigers have laid down previously.
Yeah, that second 11-plus win season in program history says a lot about Memphis, and we'll see what they do in the postseason. Another team that we have to see, not the postseason, in the offseason. Yes. See, too many things in my head right now. But in the offseason. It
is weird to say offseason already.
It is. I know, because there's still some college football going on, and I feel like we just finished up not too many days ago with the final American Conference Bowl game. So we've been all football for a lot of weeks now. Yeah. So to say
it's been so much fun.
Yeah, I know. That's why I started it off with a little sad.
It's sad. Yeah.
It's sad.
It was a little sad to see how Tulane finished their season too, because of course they had the run that they did behind Darian Mensah, who entered the transfer portal, Mekhi Hughes, who entered the transfer portal. They go to the Union Home Mortgage Gasparilla Bowl, and they fall to the Florida Gators 33-8, the final score. It was tight in the first half. It was 6-0 at halftime. You really felt like Tulane showed why their defense was a calling card in the early going this season. That defense still played very well, but they just ran out of gas in the second half, plain and simple.
Yeah, and I think that was the one thing that I had hope for with Tulane, is that the defense could keep them in the game, right? And so they started off by doing that. They, like you said, they looked good, but how long can you stand there and get stops or create a turnover without getting in any offensive production? And I give Tulane a little bit of a pass because, Mensah didn't play. He left. He transferred. And so you have different people playing those positions, and I give credit to Florida as well, because they did a really good job, especially stopping the Tulane run game, which has been so key for them this entire season. Mekhi Hughes, I think, only ran for
8 carries, 29 yards.
Yeah, I was going to say 29 yards. So I think it was a little bit of a combination of both. And I think with Tulane, though, they started off the season so strong, and then after that Memphis game, it was just like one punch after the other. They lost to Memphis. They lost the right to host. They go to Army. They lose the conference championship game. They're in it. Now they go to a bowl game, and they're just not able to perform. All that being said, I'm still excited to see what they do next year, because I think, you lose Mensah, you lose Hughes, but there's still so much for John Summerall, and I think, I don't know, maybe this is my analysis of it. I think he kind of thrives in these situations where you get to rebuild, because he's done it multiple times.
Yeah, well, remember, this is still year number 1 under John Summerall.
It's so easy to forget that. I feel like he's been there forever with the success that he had already.
Exactly, and he built something special at Troy before taking this job. Of course, the really Willie Fritz era over there in Tulane, but I really like what Summerall did and the way that he was able to piece things together as the year went along. They had those 2 early losses. We were sitting here on All-American talking about after the Oklahoma matchup. They fell to OU. They fell to Kansas State in back-to-back weeks. And what is this season going to become for Tulane in year number 1 under Summerall? Well, then they rattled off the wins that they did going into that final 3-game stretch that did not go their favor, did not go their way, but still had a 9-2 record after winning 8 straight games going into that Memphis matchup late in the season. So you can't fault the way that things ended. Of course, kind of like what I said with Seth Hennigan and the Memphis Tigers team a moment ago, their aspirations were higher. They had a chance going into those final 3 weeks to make a bid at the college football playoff. But that's a Florida team that had all their guys back, that was playing good football as the season went on and continued to get better and better. Had a 7-5 record out of the SEC when a lot of people thought that Billy Napier in Florida were done and dead to rights 3 or 4 weeks into the season. They were talking about replacing Billy Napier in the first month of the regular season. They turned that around. They fought with some heart, and they wanted to cap off what was a good year for Florida, one of the best years they've had in the Billy Napier era. So turnovers in the second half played a factor. Ty Thompson, you mentioned him at quarterback, filling in for Darian Mensah. He had 3 picks. Those 3 picks were significant. You can't have turnovers against a team like the Florida Gators and expect to have some success. And that's exactly what happened in that second half. It started a snowball, and Florida took full advantage.
Yeah, and I think once that snowball continued to happen, I think Tulane just couldn't dig themselves out of that hole. But again, interested to see how they fare in the offseason. I think it's going to be exciting. Summerall's already been super active in the portal trying to figure out who his next quarterback will be. So that's something we'll be keeping an eye on as well. But
I'm excited because he's found success with quarterbacks. Ty Thompson entered the portal, too, before the game even happened. So keep that in mind. He was going – or can't enter the portal before the game, but you know what I mean. He was going into the portal. That was his intention being known. So it's wide open at quarterback down in New Orleans. I'm really curious to see how Summerall takes an unknown name right now and makes him into Darian Mensah like he did last year.
And it was interesting to see with Ty Thompson because he would kind of play multiple roles in that rotation at Tulane, and he just recently pulled himself out of the portal so that he can maybe come back to Tulane. He might not be in that quarterback position because I think Tulane already has 3 different quarterbacks that they've pulled out of the portal.
Ooh,
so
we got a little controversy. This is going to be fun.
I know. So there's going to be a quarterback battle, and maybe Ty Thompson slots in somewhere else on that Tulane offense because, not necessarily at running back, but obviously Mekhi Hughes is gone, but now there's some different openings, and Summerall's going to try to rebuild this team a little bit to get the players that he wants in those certain positions. So interesting to see what happens in New Orleans. But here's the thing with Tulane is they're always at the top of the American Athletic Conference, and I don't find a way. Yeah, they just find it. Like even this year, like we touched on it a little bit, but I don't think anybody really had them picked maybe to finish right in that second slot in the American, and so I'm interested to see what John Summerall does with that team. But a team that also was peaking at the right time was UTSA in that second half of the season. They won their bowl game as well. This is one of my favorite clips, I think, from the postseason. Just looking at that, was it Gatorade? I don't even know what they're dumping on coaches at this point in the bowl game. I think that was a Gatorade.
I'll say, whatever the sports drink of choice is for UTSA
Powerade, maybe,
athletics.
water.
Whatever it ends up being. Yeah. It was Myrtle Beach. It could have been beach water. Who knows? It could have been the ocean water right in front. The crystal beaches of Myrtle Beach.
They actually got salt water from the ocean.
I think that's what it was.
Yeah. Well, I saw that the crew for that game.
The teal field.
The teal field, that was Coastal Carolina's home field.
I hate that field, man.
How do you like what? And you don't like the Boise State one either with the blue turf?
I'm okay with Boise State. Okay. That teal field is terrible. Let me just say it right now.
You're just putting it out there.
Now, I will say
Coastal
UTSA,
Carolina fans are going to come at you on Twitter now, or X, or whatever it's called these days.
All 6 of them will come and say hi to me on Twitter. It's fine. The teal field's terrible. UTSA was not. I mean, you showed exactly why this team was favored to be. You talk about a team that was picked to finish second in the conference. That was UTSA. They had 4 first-place votes out of that preseason media poll in the American. They put up 44 points. No quarterback controversy. His name is Owen McCown, and he's going to be playing in San Antonio for quite some time. He goes 23 of 30 passing, 254 yards. He threw a tutty. He had an interception. That's okay. We'll forget that one as well.
I really liked what.
Yeah, exactly. I liked what Amador did at the wide receiver position. I think he's a legitimate talent as well. 7 catches, 110 yards. He goes off in that matchup. Henderson on the ground had 5 carries, 61 yards. That's just over 15 yards per pop for you math wizards out there. He had a tutty as well. That's a all-around offensive performance. They put up 7 wins in a campaign where they started so poorly. That's impressive for Jeff Traylor to end on that high of a note. This is a UTSA team that will have something to say going into next year after what was a disappointing, expectation-filled year here in 2024.
And we'll talk about this more later in the show, but I think a big key for UTSA also is you return that quarterback and you return that head coach with a lot of American teams. Yeah, a lot of American teams heading into next season, as we'll discuss, have new head coaches, and they're unsure of who takes that quarterback spot. But staying on the subject of UTSA, another thing that I'll mention too is just their defense in that game as well. There were multiple guys with multiple tackles, and that sounds like a very broad statement, but just everybody kind of pitching in different ways.
It was a team effort.
Team effort is the best way to say that. Yeah, I didn't verbalize that well. I ate too many cookies over the holidays.
Me too.
Is what happened. Yeah. So, what's your favorite holiday cookie? I'm gonna derail this.
Is there such thing as a holiday cookie?
Yeah. Like, what's your favorite kind? Like,
chocolate chip. I'm boring.
You are very boring, but you go bowling on Thanksgiving. But
it's a great tradition.
You didn't do it.
The American goes bowling and they go 6-2.
They did. They
You're
were
not
great.
having them any problems.
I like when the American goes bowling. I wanted them to go 8-0. We were really close, so I appreciate that for sure. Balanced offense leads the way. Team effort on defense. As you said, building on that moment for UTSA heading into 2025, the continuity between head coach and quarterback. They'll probably hit the portal a little bit as well. I don't think they'll need to as much as some of the other teams in the conference, but either way, really liked how the Roadrunners ended that season.
Well, they're going to return some of their offensive line, which they're excited about. They have a couple defenders that are in the portal, and that they had a group of defenders that are looking for NIL opportunities elsewhere. That's going to be an interesting feel for UTSA. And it may not be the end of that because they've kind of had this collective of UTSA in terms of NIL money that's kind of limiting what they can do there. I think that's going to end very quickly. I think Jeff Traylor's going to kind of figure all that out. But going back to what they did on the field, the fact that it was scoreless at the end of the first quarter, and it went from being 0-0 with 14 minutes left in the second frame to being 27-0 by the midway point of the third quarter shows just how quickly UTSA could strike. And that balanced attack that they had, you have the rushing attack, 260 yards. That's what they showed throughout the year, especially late in the campaign when they went 7-2 down the stretch. The only losses they had was against Army, American champions, and then a wild finish against Tulsa where things unraveled and they didn't play very well against the Golden Hurricane. But the ground game and the passing game were almost equal throughout that run. They continued that identity going into the bowl game. And what did we just talk about at the start of the show? It's tough to retain your identity going into these postseason games because of the current era of college football that we deal with. So the fact that they did that shows me this is a UTSA team that will be a force to be reckoned with in 2025, and they're building toward that. If you're a player in the portal and you're in the middle of Texas and you're looking for a team to find some stability with, I think UTSA is another option for you.
Well, when you speak about identity, too, just when we had Owen McCown on the show, he knew exactly what his offense was. Like he mentioned, I think he mentioned every single player that had some kind of impact in the game that we talked to him about. And I think that awareness as a quarterback, and he's leading that offense, right? So that awareness to know who the players are that are going to make the impact and how you are going to lead them to have the best possible options and create the most offensively, I think is something that's really key. And so I think that identity continued into the bowl game, and that's why the Roadrunners finished the season like they did.
And if you're Coastal Carolina, just get rid of the teal turf.
Kyle doesn't want the teal turf.
Yeah, you got beat 44-15 on it. So yeah.
What if the teal turf was in Hawaii, like where our next bowl game was?
Only if there were 5 overtimes.
5 overtimes?
Yeah, then I would maybe like the teal turf.
See, the only problem I had with the 5 overtimes was that game was on Christmas Eve. Christmas Eve, Kyle.
Oh. This was a moment, wasn't it?
Santa
was flying overhead.
He was. Well, he was circling my house, and he couldn't land yet because I was still awake. So I was a little bummed out by it because, look, I love a good gift on Christmas morning, and I love from the time I was little. Like I was up at the crack of dawn, like waiting to go see what Santa brought me, but I couldn't go to bed on Christmas Eve because I was waiting to see South Florida win the Hawaii Bowl.
South Florida and San Jose State gave you a gift on Christmas
Eve.
The first gift of Christmas.
That was the first gift of Christmas.
Yep.
But Santa eventually came, so that was good. But that was a gift to watch that 5 overtime game.
Worried about this.
I was really concerned. Yeah. And I am, you know what? I'm probably too old to be concerned about that. I feel like your triplets were maybe a little bit more concerned about.
They were definitely concerned about it.
Yeah,
100%.
they were.
And
really
they were watching South Florida. Noel was talking about how Bryson Archie went 24 of 35 for 230 yards and an interception. And the fact that they put together another complete outing, I can't say enough. And I said this going into the bowl preview. The coaching job by Alex Golesh and this entire coaching staff, I think it just has to be commended because you're taking a team that in 2022 was 1-11. In 2021, they were 2-10. This is the last year was their first bowl appearance since 2018. You win that game in the Boca Raton Bowl in an emphatic fashion. You blow out your opponent. You win, and you go to 7-6 overall. This season, you're at 2-4 midway through the year. You figure things out with a backup quarterback in Bryson Archie who plays baseball and football. You've got a two-way guy, and then you go out to Hawaii where you're going literally across the globe to go play your postseason bowl game, and you have 5 overtimes, and yet you still outlast a team that's coming from the West Coast in order to get it done. There is a lack of words for Golesh and what he has done this year, but this team knows that their head coach can bring the most out of them. I'm super impressed with South Florida and that entire program.
Well, I just think when I think about what they kind of embodied this year, it's resiliency, because one thing that we forget about too is the whole hurricane situation where they were literally displaced and they had to play one of their games.
That was another element.
Yeah,
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, they spent however many days away from their campus. They had to play in a game against a good opponent where they were supposed to have like a sold out crowd. They were
the underdogs by 2.5 too.
Yeah, they're going to debut new uniforms. Like it was so exciting, and then everything gets pushed back. Yep. They're just totally displaced, and they had to come back, play the UAB, and that was a back and forth game against a team that you know they think that they should maybe be able to beat a little bit easier. So they just had to overcome so much this year, and I give not only Alex Golesh and his staff so much credit, but I give Bryce Archie credit as well, because he didn't come into the best situation either. You know, Byron Brown looked like he was going to lead that South Florida team to have so much success, and so they could have just given up after 2-4, and they didn't. And so I think that when we're talking about programs building, I think that if you're at South Florida, you're staying there because you believe in what Alex Golesh does, and I think that they've just been so impressive to watch, not only in the Hawaii Bowl in all 5 overtimes, but this entire season.
And I think it's interesting. You put up 41 points, and I know there were 14 points put up in overtime from the South Florida side of things, but you put up 41 points, and you only had 56 rushing yards on 34 attempts. This team did not run the ball very well, but you know what they did do? They capitalized on goal line opportunities. You see one right there where they punch it in, or that was San Jose State. But Kelly Joyner had a touchdown. Naquan Wright had a touchdown. Teron Keefe had a touchdown. They all had these scores, but they couldn't run the ball. But when you get down to the goal line, you're able to set yourself up at the doorstep. That's when you take advantage. If they did not have that sort of continued success down in the red zone, you don't win that football game. And that tells me that's good coaching. That tells me Alex Golesh had a plan, that the offensive coordinator had a plan. Their offensive coordinator, Joel L. Gordon, had a plan going into it. They needed to take advantage of every opportunity, and they did that in a game against a good San Jose State team who arguably had the best receiver in the country playing for him. And they, of course, didn't have him playing in this game specifically. He sat out going into the NFL. I'm very impressed. Very, very.
Well, Alex Goller spoke exactly to what you just talked about in his post-game presser. He was just saying that their whole mentality going into that game is to always be ready for that next play and just to create some of those opportunities. And my favorite thing he said, and going back to, the baseball references, he's like, we just kept swinging. So his quarterback, plays baseball. So I guess he had to get that baseball reference in there as well. But I think that they, as you said, had a plan, executed it, and even when it didn't work out in some instances, they just went to that next play. Yeah. And that was a resiliency battle right there. That's why they won that game. I feel like, to sum up that entirety of their season, for them to finish their final game in 5 overtimes and win it is just like, hey, this is exactly what happened all year long. Why not end it like this?
Nick Nash, by the way, was the name I was thinking of. That was the wide receiver. 6 days before the game, dropped out of the bowl game.
You were excited about seeing him.
I was excited
play.
about seeing him.
Yeah.
He was a late drop too. Like
right.
I said, 6 days before. So unfortunate there. He'll be probably a 3rd or 4th round draft pick in the NFL. Here's one that maybe the team that ended up winning didn't have a whole lot of NFL draft talent, but they do have a guy named Blake Horvath. That guy is incredible. We go right back to it. We started the season talking about Heisman Horvath. We end the season talking about Heisman Horvath. How about that? They take down the Oklahoma Sooners in the Armed Forces Bowl in Fort Worth, 21-20, the final score.
It didn't look, well, before I get into that, the graphic. Pettiness. Next season, we're having a pettiness meter or a pettiness.
Of course, this is playing off the SEC staying that it just means more.
It just means more at Navy. We like it. Navy has been on point with all their pettiness the past couple of weeks, so shout out to their social team for that as well. But
we need to get them on the show. Just the Navy social team.
The Navy social team. Yeah, we got to see who's running that. So we'll have to do some digging. Navy social team, if you're hearing this, send us a message. We wanna chat.
My DMs are open.
Always.
Make it happen.
You can send nice messages, preferably, but angry ones, they're accepted
I'm here
as well.
For that too. Why not?
Kyle will respond though, and then we'll have Twitter wars. But as I was saying before I got to the pettiness, it didn't look good for Navy at the beginning, and as I was sitting there watching that game, I'm like, man, I believed that they could win this game, and they went down 14-0, and I'm like, oh my goodness. But going back to Heisman Horvath, that's exactly what changed the course of that game. He had some big runs, including the longest touchdown run in Navy history, that 95-yard touchdown. Oh my goodness, he just looked so good on that play.
Well, in our bowl preview, we talked about how guys outside of Horvath needed to step up in a big way. We needed Alex Teska to step up. He stepped up in a huge way, provided everything from a blocking standpoint. He provided everything from a weapon standpoint, had the 11-yard touchdown run to help open the scoring. After really, it's funny, I covered Michael Hawkins, the quarterback for Oklahoma, during his time in high school. He went to Frisco, Emerson High School, covered him for 2 years. Before that, he was at Allen, called some games with Allen. I've gotten to know the Hawkins family pretty well, and he's a really good quarterback. I think he'll be something special because of his athletic ability, because of the what he can do with his arm strength. But this was a growing game for Michael Hawkins. They came out firing. Oklahoma saw that. Put up 14 points. Navy had to adjust. The adjustment from the Navy defense to not allow anything other than that last-second touchdown at the end of the game. From the opening quarter, OU put up 14 points in the opening frame, did not score until there were 6 seconds left in the fourth quarter, which, by the way, what a wild ending there. Ooh. Oklahoma elects to go for it. They do not get it. And then, of course, Navy ends up winning because of that decision. Either way, I give this win as much as it is for Blake Horvath. This is on the Navy defense, the way they slowed down a weapon of a quarterback and allowed their offense to have, at least within striking distance, an opportunity to put up some points. That's why they won this game, because Navy made the adjustments necessary to slow down a dual-threat quarterback, and it helped them take this game over in the second half and ultimately win it in the end.
Well, I think that's been a trend for them their last couple of games of the season, right? We saw them do that against Army as well. Nobody could stop the Army rushing attack.
Yes.
Nobody could stop Bryson Daly. Navy won the Army-Navy game because they came out completely prepared for that Army offense. They knew what they were going to do. They game planned. They made adjustments. And so I think that just not only talks about the players on the field, but that goes back to coaching too. We spent so much of this season talking about Drew Cronick and the Navy offense. How about the defense making those adjustments? And that's why, again, we'll touch more on it later, but I'm excited for Navy next season because The thing about Navy is once those athletes get to junior year, they're not getting in any portal. Mm-hmm. And so 3 athletes that are juniors on that team are 3 that we talk about all the time, and Eli Heidenreich, Alex Teska, and of course Blake Horvath. So they're still there.
Be legit.
Yeah. So, I mean, we'll break it down more later, but I think that this is such a huge momentum builder. You win a bowl game against an SEC opponent nonetheless, and I think that this was just testament to the defense, testament to the way that Navy played in this game.
I know on this show we talk a lot about offensive names because it's a short show and we don't really go into all the details that we can with all these teams. I've got 3 defensive names that stood out to me in this game. Going back and watching the film, too, they were all over the place. Colin Ramos led the team in tackles. He had 12 tackles. It felt like every time there was a play being made, you saw number 44 around the football. I thought that was impressive. Kyle Jacob. Talk about filling up the stat sheet. This dude had a pass defense. He had a tackle for loss. He had a sack. He had 9 tackles. He was all over the field in his own right as well. Really impressive from Kyle Jacob. And then those 2 guys were seniors, by the way. The last one was a sophomore, Griffin Willis. When they needed a stop in 2 different drives, he had a huge sack in a late down scenario in order to push them behind the chains and help out the defense to ultimately get a stop and bring Michael Hawkins to the ground. Those 3 guys, and it wasn't just those 3, it was a complete team effort on defense, but those 3 were impressive. And going back and watching the film, I thought the way that they took advantage of every opportunity to get the ball back to their offense, whether it was in good field position or bad field position, and then Blake Horvath goes 95 yards to the house. All of that worked in their favor. It was a really fun game to watch, and credit to Navy because that was not an easy matchup. But guess what? You've got some supporters here. There were 2 people on this set. I'm not going to say who. There were 2 people on this set that said that Navy was going to win that football game.
I think that was us.
It was us. Go Navy.
Thank you for making us look better. Thank you.
Yes,
we appreciate it.
Very nice. Always love it. Always love it.
More wins for the American. Another victory in a bowl game. East Carolina beating NC State.
This was a wild game.
Wild
game. And then give NC State credit. They fought their way back in this game too. And almost clipped ECU there at the end. 26-21 the final. East Carolina gets the win over the top of it. How about the 89-yard touchdown run with 1 minute and 33 seconds remaining?
They've been bringing pressure a lot these last few drives. Showing it again here. They run it. Harris breaks free, has the first down, makes a man miss. It's a foot race. Rajay Harris, 86-yard touchdown.
Oh my goodness, Rajay Harris. He was the difference maker in this game for that obvious reason. But Kyle, I just can't even fathom the excitement there. I don't know. One thing for me when I was watching this entire game was that Rajay Harris just kept talking about how this was going to be his last game in an ECU uniform and how he just wanted to show out for the Pirates. He was going to leave it all on the field. You saw it in that play right there. But the entire game, he just looked like a man on a mission. I just think every time he had the football, he was just constantly running the ball through multiple people. It reminded me of, I'm sorry, I keep bringing this up about your alma mater, but when ECU just ran through like the entire North Texas defense and just nobody could bring anybody down.
Yeah, I remember
that's
that
how
too.
Rajay Harris looked every time he touched the football against NC State.
No, it was awesome. It was really great. He had a great stat line at the end of it. I know he went for 220 yards. That was a big touchdown there at the end. Caden Hauser, of course, did what he needed to do to keep them within striking distance all the way through, but it was all about Harris at the end of the day. 17 carries, 220, 13 yards per pop. That means every time he touched the football, he had a first down and more. Usually it's 3 yards in a cloud of dust. How about 13 yards in a cloud of dust? An American Bowl game rushing record. Impressive from Rajay Harris. And like you said, it's not new. Everybody in the American kind of knew this going up against it, but you go up against an NC State defense that had some success throughout the year in the ACC and was one of the better teams, at least at the early parts of the season. I know they were banged up at the end. They had a lot of injuries to deal with. But you took full advantage and you put up 13 yards per pop. Give credit to Harris. Give credit to that entire coaching staff. Blake Harrell, man, he's got the Pirates rolling. Hauser's going to return.
Yep.
Of course, you don't have Harris next year, but you've got some other pieces that you can piece together and have some fun with the Pirates out in Greenville. I'm really excited about seeing what they bring to the table.
Yeah, and they're 5-1 under Blake Harrell, and the thing that I noticed about it, and we talked about it a little bit on this show, but when you go onto social media, when you watch Harrell sit with his guys at press conferences, all they talk about is how much they want to play for him, how much they want to run through a wall for him. And the thing with Harrell as well is he just loves East Carolina and their fan base. And I think those two things go hand in hand together, because you have the fan support, you have the player support, and that is why they're able to win football games. And I just think that it's been really fun to watch, because I've said it so many times, but East Carolina loses that game against Charlotte, right? And they are just not looking great. That's their rival. They want to play well. And then all of a sudden, no. It looks so bad. Harrell takes over. They rally the troops. And now they win a bowl game at the end of it all. So I am just give all the credit to him, and I'm really excited about the Pirates.
The way that season started, I mean, we've talked about it a couple times on this show. I mean, you start the season where you're 3-4, you don't really know the direction of your program. You end up moving on from Mike Houston, and Mike Houston's a good football coach. Don't get me wrong, and we said that whenever they parted ways in the middle of the season. But then they hand the reins over to Blake Harrell, who had been there for 5 seasons, who had been there for quite some time, and then he rattles off wins against Florida Atlantic, wins against Tulsa, wins against North Texas, and then you end up like this, the way that they finish the season. I mentioned UTSA and the momentum that they have and the returners that they have. I think Blake Harrell and this ECU squad are right there. This is going to be a team that's going to make noise. I love that celebration, by the way. The thumbs up, and then it's slowly into the thumbs down. This is a team that's
celebrations next year.
That's going to be fun. This is a team that'll be fun next year. They got to find a way to run the football, return some of those guys up front on the offensive line, and then you can build there. But, yeah, they've got something cooking.
Well, Caden Hauser can run the football as
Yes,
well.
he
We
can.
saw him do it in that Military Bowl, and I think that was a big key. I mean, Rajay Harris, we gave him his flowers, and we can continue to give him his flowers because he did it all season long. He did it in the bowl game, but Hauser looked good running the football. He can throw it as well. And going back to what we kind of said about UTSA, the big thing for me is looking at teams that have that returning quarterback and head coach combination. This is another one with East Carolina. So they're going to have to figure out how to replace Rajay Harris. I don't know if you can do that with one person. I don't see that happening. It's going to have to be a couple different guys making up for some of that yardage. But I just think that this is going to be a team that can be exciting if they hit the portal as they need to, but they have some key pieces returning that they can really capitalize on.
I'm interested to see how Harrell in his first year as a head coach, too, attacks recruiting. They've got an influx of talent in North Carolina, right? In terms of high school sports in North Carolina, you've got some a significant talent pool out there, and then you can hit the portal in terms of guys that are coming from college as well. They've got a couple different ways to do it, but they've got Caden Hauser. I mentioned that he's a dual threat quarterback that's going to make an impact next year. Now, there's another dual threat quarterback that made an impact this year. He was the American Conference Offensive Player of the Year. His name is none other than
Bryson Daly.
Boom, Captain America.
Captain America.
Bryson Daly, they win it. The 12 wins on the docket, a 12-2 Army Black Knights squad, 27-6 over Louisiana Tech. This was a wild scenario. We talked about it on the last show for All-American. You had Marshall and the Thundering Herd, another team that won the Sun Belt Conference. They were going to Shreveport, Louisiana. They have to back out because of the significant number of players that exited via the transfer portal. So then it's Louisiana Tech making the short drive down from Ruston to face Army. And the Black Knights made sure that it was just a drive down the road and a drive back.
Yeah. I think after losing the Army-Navy game, they were out for blood even more so than already. Get the most wins in program history with 12. That's fantastic. And Bryson Daly, MVP of that bowl game. Nothing new. He played as we know how he can play. I don't know how much more we can talk about him or how good he is. I know that I'm going to miss watching him play next year because he just really was so much fun to watch, and the way that, talk about coaching, the way that coaching staff utilized him, because he didn't even play that much in years past, and for him to come on in the way that he did, I think it speaks a lot to the way that they finally figured out how to get the most out of their player, which again speaks to good coaches. So Bryson Daly doing it all again for Army. Kanye Udo didn't play in that game because he entered the transfer portal, so they still were able to win without him. So I think that says a lot about Army as well. Ending on a really good note after that loss to Navy.
I still can't believe a quarterback rushed for 32 touchdowns this year. He put up 1,700 yards on the ground, by the way. Let me add that. He also put up 1,000 yards through the air, had 9 passing touchdowns, only threw the 4 interceptions throughout the year, took care of the football, ran the ball effectively. He averaged 130 on the ground per game, 75 through the air per game. Bryson Daly was special. It was a special season. Finished 6th in the Heisman voting. Could have been higher, in my opinion. They saw some other guys. I think it was between him and Scadaboo from Arizona State, where
they were 5-6.
it was 5 and 6. So those were the 2 guys outside of the 4 Heisman finalists. And you saw what Scadaboo did in the college football playoff against Texas. So the fact that Bryson Daly was even in that conversation shows the impact that he had for a service academy team that won a conference championship in their first year with the American Athletic. Lots to be remembered this year, but I think when I look back on this team, you're going to remember Bryson Daly and what he did. Also, props to Kanye Udo. Udo was a great player throughout the year. He had a ton of success, and I wish him nothing but the luck that he'll have at the Big 12 level with Arizona State this next year. That's where he transferred in the portal, so he's going to have some fun with that Sun Devils offense and replacing a guy like Scadaboo at the running back position. But, man, this Army Black Knights team, it began and ended with Bryson Daly being a true dog. And he could just continue to show that throughout the year.
And I want to add one more thing about Bryson Daly, because I think this is one thing that we haven't really touched on. When they won the American Athletic Conference, they're trying to get Bryson Daly to get his post-game interview with ESPN, and nobody can find him, right? They're looking for him. He's taking photos with little kids who somehow found their way onto the field.
How cool.
And so I think that just says a lot about who he is as a person. They were so excited. You hear the little voices like, Bryson, and he stops. And they're waiting for him. The first time in program history that Army wins the American Athletic Conference, he just had a fantastic game. They beat Tulane, and that's what he was doing. And so I think that just speaks a lot about him as a person in addition to him as a football player.
I'm interested to see how his post-football life goes now. You know, like, of course, when you're a part of the service academy and you kind of move on into that next level of service and you're serving our country, a lot of times whenever players like this are all-time greats for their collegiate programs, the saying is he'll never buy a drink in Tuscaloosa ever again, or he'll never buy a drink in Baton Rouge ever again. Now it's like, where is Bryson Daly going to end up, and where is he not going to end up buying a drink? Because the entire service academy of the Army now knows who Bryson Daly is. He is a household name throughout the Army. That's so interesting to me because he did so much for that football program, and he created so many great memories for those that are serving our country and continue to give their lives to protect our freedoms, he being one of those, and now he's going to get to serve alongside those individuals as well. I just think that's such an interesting mindset, and it's something that we really haven't seen in years, decades even, going all the way back to the last time that Navy and Army were this good and having the seasons that they did in terms of winning double-digit games, winning postseason matchups, and doing what they did at the very end. Bryson Daly is a hero for the Army Black Knights program, and he's going to continue to be America's hero now that he's serving our country. It's really an interesting and really cool anecdote to the end of what is a phenomenal college career.
And I think back to when he was on All-American, and we were quizzing him about
different things
about Army history, and he knew all of it, and he was talking about what the Black Knights had done before he even arrived on campus, the national championships, the Heisman winners that they had. And I think that it was just such a full circle moment now when we step back and look at the season that he had and the history that he made and everything that he did, not only for Army West Point, the school, but as you said, the armed services. Yes. And so I think it's a really cool moment. I think that there's nobody better to be in that position because he is, I mean, we'll talk about an all-American type of person.
Yes.
From the field to the classroom to the kind of person he is beyond it. Bryson Daly We're giving you all your flowers on our final football episode of All-American.
It makes me sad to think that this is the last time we're going to talk about Bryson Daly, but
know.
it's been a fun season. So now we're 6 wins in. We've talked about all 6 wins for the American. One more game to go. That was the first game of the 2025 calendar year for the American Conference. It was the First Responders Bowl in Dallas, Texas. North Texas and the Mean Green, who, of course, started the year on a very high note, 5-1 to start before losing 5 straight games. They get bowl eligibility in the final week of the regular season with a win over Temple. They were the final team to play for the American this season, but they did so without Chandler Morris, transfers to Virginia. They did so without D.T. Sheffield, one of the more electrifying receivers in all of college football. He enters his transfer portal as well. They did so with a quarterback by the name of Drew Mestemaker, a former Vandergrift High School quarterback who did not make a start at the varsity level. His last time starting before this game was in the 9th grade for the freshman B team. He did not start because of the talent that was ahead of him on the depth chart at quarterback, but he made his starts at safety. He was working as a linebacker. He was also a punter, an all-district punter at the high school level. Eric Morris saw him at a camp, still throwing the ball around, throwing the rock around. He said, you know what? I know how to do some special things with quarterbacks. I've coached Patrick Mahomes. I've coached Cam Ward. I've coached Chandler Morris now. Why don't you come to North Texas? We've got a spot for you. And he ends up starting this bowl game and puts up a measly stat line of 26 for 41 passing with 393 yards, 2 touchdowns. Oh, and by the way, he was the team's leading rusher for 55 yards and a tutty as well. Unbelievable, the storyline. However, it does end up in a loss 30-28 against Texas State.
So is that stat line good, is what you're telling me?
Very good. It was actually a North Texas bowl game record for that matter, and it was the most total yardage by a rookie since 2008 in a postgame or a postseason game, in a bowl game. The last quarterback to put up this amount of yardage as a freshman in a bowl game goes by the name of Lamar Jackson.
I think I know him.
He won a Heisman at Louisville. Keep that in mind.
Okay.
And he also has won a couple NFL MVPs and is in the running to win a 3rd one. So, yeah, pretty darn good company for Drew Mestemaker as a guy who did not start since his freshman B team. It was really a crazy stat line that took the nation by storm, even in a losing effort. Give credit to North Texas, Eric Morris and company. They took the month off to prepare for this game, and they came out firing and had an opportunity all the way up until the very end before a 73-yard late touchdown run from Lincoln Perry took the thing over and ended up winning it for Texas State.
And I think, look, this is a loss, right? It's one of the 2 losses in the American 6-2 bowl record, but I just think that North Texas gets a lot of credit in this situation because even with the way that season ended, they weren't even sure if they were going to make a bowl game. Yeah. Temple made that final game of the season very close. And so,
yeah, you were there for that.
Yeah, it was really cold. Great play from another youngster in that game as well. And I think that the fact that, as you said, they took this whole month to just be the best version of North Texas that they could be without Chandler Morris, without D.T. Sheffield. The storyline of the Mean Green all year has been the fact that their offense is very good. Their defense is where they struggled. And now you take away 2 key components of that offense. And I think some of us were thinking, oh my goodness, how is this game against Texas State going to go? You're losing the part of your team that has helped you stay in games, win games. And Mestemaker says, oh, I can help with that.
I got you. Don't worry.
I got you. No worries. And he truly did. And
Let me just take off for a 70-yard touchdown run to make it close at the end.
Yeah. I'm basically playing 9th grade B football. I don't know why you guys, you know, the line where they're like, what? Like it's hard? That was him. I think that's what this is me thinking in my petty socialness brain.
Oh, okay.
I think that if North Texas wins that game, that's the graphic. Like put up his stat line and then like put the comparison with oh my goodness, it's from Legally Blonde. Yeah. With
Reese Witherspoon.
Reese Witherspoon. I was picturing it in my head. Again, I ate too many cookies.
Legally blonde.
Okay, I'm brunette. All right,
Sorry,
brunette. But maybe I should be. But anyway, I digress. That would have been the graphic. Mestemaker did a great job. I think that yes, North Texas comes up short, but I think there's a lot to be proud of in this game.
Well, and it's anticipated that Mestemaker would return and that he would have an entire offseason kind of go into that mold. I know the transfer portal so far has been very kind to North Texas. They've been recruiting very well out of the portal. A couple quarterback recruits already, one of which from the University of Miami. That was a 4-star coming out of high school. So he'll have some competition. It'll be interesting to see what they do from a offense standpoint to rebuild what they did. That was the whole story around the 5-1 start. The prolific offense led by Eric Morris. He's an offensive genius. He has that whole mindset moving into building a roster, and that's why they put up 52 points against Tulsa. That's why they put up 41 on Florida Atlantic, 44 on Wyoming, 52 on South Alabama, a team that did a big-time job in the Sun Belt Conference this past year too. So I do like the pieces that they put together. They're going to miss Damon Ward Jr. He was an impressive wide receiver for North Texas for quite some time. Of course, broke the single game North Texas record with 230 yards in that opener against South Alabama. Lots of rebuilding there. They got rid of their defensive coordinator, parted ways with him midway through the season. Eric Morris has some work to do. This North Texas staff has some work to do, but if Mestemaker and that fight from North Texas is there, I have confidence that they're going to have some success into next year as well. In a tough conference, remember, 6 new head coaches, all these teams that are returning. We talked about East Carolina. We talked about UTSA. I don't know if I can put North Texas in that sense right now, but I need to see more. I need to see more, and they're recruiting the portal really well. They've always had the Dallas area to pull talent from, so I have some confidence at the high school ranks there as well. Got to get bigger up front, especially on the offensive line. It was a revolving door this year. They had 10 different combinations of their starting offensive line, most in the FBS this past year. Solidify your offensive line and then start from there.
And I also think you touched on it a little bit, but that defense, there needs to be a solution there because you talk about the 5-1 start, that second half of the season, you're the alum. I'll let you say it was a little rough.
It was bad. I'll say it.
Because of the defense, and so I think that there needs to maybe be some solutions there, and I think that's exactly what they're going to do. So I'm excited to talk about North Texas next year because I think, as you said, Eric Morse is going to hit the portal. He's going to take a look at the things that they struggled with. And I'm excited to see the offense that he puts together as well, because just in that bowl game, even though they did not win, I think that there was a lot to show that, hey, even with a lot of missing pieces, we can still be competitive. Yeah,
and in the time that I've gotten to know Coach Morris over the last few years, I've seen one thing remain true and remain steady despite some up and downs. Like we said, win 5 games in the first 6 contests and then you lose 5 games. There's been some ups and downs. One thing's remained consistent. Guys love playing for Eric Morris. He is a player's coach. He really takes care of his student athletes. I respect that about him. I respect that about the entire North Texas athletic department. And I'm not just saying that because I'm an alum. I've seen it around the country. I've covered a lot of collegiate athletics, covered a lot of pro athletics. I don't always say that. I do say that about what North Texas does. So if you are a guy in the portal like that, and you're making a jump to North Texas, expect to play for a guy you'll enjoy playing for, and that's what Eric Morris brings. So it's not going to be easy, and they've got some tough competition. The American is very tough. We just saw it, 6 wins in 8 games in the bowl season. What a year all the way through for the American Athletic Conference. When you look back on 2024 and the football season that was, what'll be your lasting impact?
Oh, my goodness. That's a really, really tough question. I think just the fact of the way that the American competed within itself, but also the way that it competed on the bigger national stage. We saw it in the bowl games. We saw it just when they played each other. I think some of those really exciting conference matchups, I mean, we would look at the slate and I'd be like, oh, I'm excited for every single game this week. And so I think just that competitiveness and the resiliency, I think, is the word that I'm going to look at the most. Army, first year in the league, they win the conference. They lose the Army-Navy game. They come back and win their bowl game. Navy has some rough patches. They come back and win. ECU, we talked a lot about them, just the way that they're able to, under Blake Harrell, be so much better in that second half of the season. So I think resiliency of this conference and the way that they've competed, South Florida had ups and downs, and just I think that's something that I look back on and I'm like, wow, this was a really fun year for the American Conference football teams.
Yeah, when I look back at 2024 for the American, it goes back to the early storylines that we talked about on this show. You have some of the best coaches in the country. You have some of the best student athletes in the country. And you continue to see why this conference wins games outside of their conference. And we said it in the non-conference slate. We said it early in the campaign. And a lot of the country, I think, were reluctant to take notice. They were reluctant to really dive in to what the American brought. But what will last with me for the 2024 season in the American is the way that shined at the very end. Because it wasn't just the 6-2 bowl record. That certainly tells a story in the way that this conference is moving in the right direction. They have some depth. They have the talent to compete with anyone else on a national stage. But it was the way that the conference championship game took center spotlight on a Friday night in West Point, New York, in Michie Stadium, and the way that atmosphere took over and was the center of the nation in terms of college football. And then you go to the Army-Navy game, the first time that it features two American Conference teams, and that way that took center stage, and then it was Navy that won it. It's these service academies. That's what's going to stick with me. Yes, I love the Tulane storylines. I loved the Memphis storylines. The way that ECU rallied around Blake Harrell at the end of the campaign all plays a factor. But as I said earlier in the show, this is the first time since World War II that we've had these two, Navy and Army, playing at such a high level and having such tremendous success. That's what's going to stick with me in 2024, and it helped shine a light on the conference as a whole. And then when they were given that spotlight going into bowl season because of what Army and Navy did to put that spotlight on the doorstep, they took advantage and won 6 games out of 8 tries. A really impressive year all the way across the board. It was special to cover the American this year. Couldn't have asked for a better campaign to start All-American for myself and for really the way that we've started and continued. Nothing to do with us. It's all about the student athletes, the coaches, the different athletic departments that we've been able to cover. It was really, really a special year all the way through.
Yeah, it was just exciting. I love the way that you put it about the service academies, because I think that, you know, in the era of the transfer portal and NIL, there are 2 programs in the country, and, you know, Air Force as well, but that are kind of back to that original way that college football used to be played, right? Mm-hmm. I say that with air quotes.
It's a throwback.
It is. It's a throwback. And so just even the point that I made earlier of, we know that Horvath, Heidenreich, and Teska are going to be back at Navy bearing some crazy circumstance because they have to sign their service to the United States of America, to the Navy, to Army in their respective rights. And so I think that there's just something so special about covering those schools, and the fact that they played so well was so much fun. And then just even the fact that going into the last week of the regular season, there were American teams in the CFP conversation. Yes. And so that's like a whole nother aspect that I think is really interesting. And if we even want to spend a lot of time talking about it, those losses for Army and Navy, like you see what Notre Dame's done now, they don't look as bad. So I just think the way that this league played as a whole, with the service academies, with everyone in it, it has just been an incredible year to cover the American.
No doubt. Now, looking ahead to 2025, got a couple of teams, 6 teams actually, that have new head coaches. Of course, Rice, Temple, ECU, FAU, Charlotte, and Tulsa. Here are the names that are going to be taking over those different programs all the way through. Really excited to see what these guys bring to their respective programs. Any names stick out to you right now as a go-to? I'm going to take East Carolina off the board because of what Blake Harrell's done. We've seen that already. They just removed the interim tag there. The other 5 guys, which one stands out?
I like Casey Keeler at Temple.
Okay.
I think that program is really looking for somebody to get it back to where it was at one point. And I think he's had so much success in his past coaching jobs. And I think he's a good person too. He does a lot of community service, like beyond the field. And I think maybe that's something that can help rally the troops, right? You're looking for something that's different than has been there before. I mean, they've struggled the last couple of years, and the Owls are looking for an answer. And so I know that's maybe a different pick than what some people might say, but I like that job for Casey Keeler, and I think it might be an interesting one next season.
Yeah, there's a couple names there. Like you said, it's tough to really point out one. I think Trey Lamb at Tulsa. That's you talk about a team that could take advantage of the NIL era. There's some funding in Tulsa. They've got cash up there in a private school in Tulsa. Young guy. I mean, he's just in his mid-30s. I mean, he is a young cat, and they kind of need that as their rally cry. Former head coach at Gardner-Webb, did some good things at Gardner-Webb. We've seen them at the FCS level make some noise throughout. I think it was kind of a questioned hire, but a lot of times it's what you need. You need to take a chance.
Right.
You need to go out and get a guy that you feel like gut feeling is going to bring you what is special. They retain Ryan Switzer, former NFL wide receiver, standout in North Carolina throughout his collegiate tenure as well. He stays on. He had the interim tag, but they remain with him. That's a recruiting pool in its own right. I'm interested to see what Trey Lamb will do going into his first season. It may not be immediate, but give it some time. I think Tulsa will be back into winning ways. They've produced NFL talent. There's a guy playing in the Pro Bowl next week that played at Tulsa. His name's Tyler Smith, and he's the starting offensive guard for the Dallas Cowboys. They have some significant talent there to pull from. Oklahoma, Arkansas, Texas, Louisiana. They'll find it. And I think the 35-year-old head coach in Trey Lamb is just the guy to do it. All right. With that being said, who's the favorite going into 2025?
The favorite? I'm not picking one favorite because those are the things that happen when they clip it and then they show you when you pick wrong. But I will say,
I'll pick a favorite.
Well, looking at all that,
say it with your chest.
With my chest. Oh.
Say it strong.
I like Navy right now, and I'm going to tell you why. Because I think that this is because they are the most solidified team I see right now. They return their head coach. They return those 3 guys I've already said multiple times, including Blake Horvath. I think that's huge, right? They have returned some of those guys on that defense that we talk so much about, and they're not going anywhere. We know that because they had to sign letters that said that they are not going anywhere. And I think the way that they played at the end of the season, now they have this momentum. They just beat an Oklahoma team that's in the SEC. I just think that there's an opportunity for them to be really good next year. And I think they have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder too, right? They were picked 11th in the preseason poll, and then they start off really well, and they play really, really well. They lose to Notre Dame, and the season flutters a little bit, and they're not really able to get that back until the end of the season. I think they have something to prove, and I think they have the guys to do it. So there's my pick right now.
Okay. Navy's a good one. I'll go different than that. I think Navy could be my pick too. I'll say UTSA. I really will. And part of that was because of the expectations that were set on the Roadrunners this year. Picked second in the preseason poll, did not live up to that, had some significant losses early on. I think the one that stands out to me was 49-10 to Texas State in the first couple weeks of the year. Just never really had that mentality. They found it in the back half of the year. They found it down the stretch. They showed that, hey, not only are we offensively equipped to make some noise with Owen McCown at quarterback and with these running backs that we have coming back, we've got a defense that'll make some noise. Even with the guys moving into the portal, I trust Jeff Traylor. He's a great recruiter, especially in Texas. He knows how to hit the Lone Star State and the high school ranks very, very well. I expect them to recruit well. I expect them to reload. And I think they're up there as a team that's going to make some noise in 2025 as a potential favorite. Like you said, it's tough to make a call, but right now I would put my money on the Roadrunners to be the best team in the American next year. Not counting out Memphis, not counting out Tulane, but that's where I see it heading right this second as we sit in January of 2025.
I know that. I think that's like the hard part is because I could look at Navy because I know who's
what's
still
coming
there,
back.
right?
Yeah.
I just think, I mean, we didn't even mention Tulane, right? We know that John Summerall hits the portal really well. So I think that when we come back next season, we might have completely different answers before a game is even played because somebody might go out and grab multiple people that are fantastic. And so I think that's my very early pick. But I think that there's a lot of things that are going to happen this offseason that maybe people will clip in and be like, remember when you said this? And I'll be like, okay, I'll take responsibility for that.
I hope so. I hope that happens. I really do. All right, All-American fans, we've appreciated you in terms of the football side of things. But now we move and transition into a new part of All-American. And it starts this week with some top plays.
Ooh.
How about that? Starting with number 5, Maria, I'll let you go first.
You want me to go first? All right, South Florida. This one wasn't only on our top plays. It was on a Sports Center top plays. The Bulls have about a 16-point lead here. Look at this pass from Jaden Reed. Bang, slam, all of it over to Reynolds. I just love that. He threw that through not one, but 2 Wichita State shockers.
Yeah, split the defenders,
I love
leave
it.
the back door open like that.
Love it.
Always going to have some success. I love it. I really do. All right, I want to go to the women's game overall. How about the Temple Owls, team that's had some ups and downs? They needed some ups in order to steal the basketball and then have an opportunity on the other end. How about this? With the and one opportunity, not an and one, they didn't call a foul, but it was at the end of the buzzer in the end of the third quarter, all the way through. Temple with the steal and the lay-in to beat the buzzer and then have things closer against that South Florida team.
I love when good defense turns into some buckets and some offense. Yeah. I think as a coach, you love to preach that, like, see, you play good defense, is what happens. You get 2 points, especially at the end of the third quarter. Now, this next play, a little bit of deja vu. We might have seen this before. Remember Jordan Riley? He had a pretty big dunk earlier in the year for East Carolina. Well, he's at it again. One-handed slam. Oh, my gosh.
He took off on that one, had a high-flying attack. East Carolina's got some athletes, man.
I know.
Coach Schwartz and company have that thing rocking in terms of the athleticism.
Woo.
Little style point on that one. Taking flight is right.
Yeah, a little emphasis, too, on the throwing it down. Like, bam. I was
Somebody
like, oh.
call air traffic control.
Okay.
All right, back to the women's game for this one. The University of North Texas, reigning co-champions in the American Conference, tied at 71 against Memphis on the road. Final 6 seconds. They have an inbound. They find Ariana Hardaway splitting a couple defenders, banks it up and in right before the final buzzer to win it on the road. The Mean Green continue to show out in the women's game. They won the conference title last year, raised a banner, had the preseason player of the year in the conference with Tamisha Lampkin down low. They say, Lampkin, you've done your job. Let's go to Ariana Hardaway, another veteran on that bunch, and she gets it done at the buzzer.
At the buzzer, and she went up against it's almost two defenders right there. Look, she's using her entire body to get that bucket, but let's stay in North Texas. We'll go to the men's game for our number one play.
I'm always
here.
down for that.
This is the last game that the Mean Green played in 2024. So they had to make it memorable, right? At the buzzer, time is out. Swoosh. Your alma mater wins.
I like it. You said time is out. Clock struck midnight for the preseason favorites in the American UAB. This was on New Year's Eve, nighttime, late game on ESPN, national audience. Adam Wright, the transfer from Drake, he hit a late second shot, not a buzzer beater, true buzzer beater against Oregon State in a tie ball game. It was 66-all. I was on the call for that one. He hits another one, another tie game. This was a true buzzer beater. Clock hits red right there at the end, hits 00, gets it to fall. They even put it on the ESPN social account saying that he hit the Jordan logo as he hit it. They said it was the Jordan make against the Utah Jazz. Similar play, top of the key, nothing but ice in his veins. Adam Wright, the transfer from Drake, gets it done for Ross Hodge in the Mean Green.
That one was fun. I loved watching that. When that happened, because here's the thing, he needed a 2. And he steps back. I think he needed to try to create some space. But still, he steps back and makes it 3. He's like, let's make it even fancier than it needed to be. So I like it. Extra style points on that one as well.
Well, that's the thing. UAB right now is tired of seeing North Texas in general because UAB's won conference championships. They've won all these different titles. They've had guys like Jordan Jelly Walker and, of course, the team that they have now that won the championship last year and are favorites to win it again in 2025. However, every time they go up against North Texas, something crazy happens. It's either a double OT thriller, or they're going down to the wire in a conference tournament, or they're getting beat in the NIT championship game a couple years ago when Tyler Perry goes off and has some clutch makes. Andy Kennedy is a phenomenal head coach. One of my favorite head coaches in all of college basketball, and he just so happens to be at UAB and the American Athletic Conference. He's done a great job there, but for some reason, that kryptonite is also green. It's just a form of mean green for UAB and the Blazers. This is basketball talk. I could do this all day. You know what? This isn't the last episode of All-American.
We slamming the laptop shut?
A slam dunk, per se.
Are you foreshadowing?
I am foreshadowing quite a bit. You know why?
Why?
Because the next time we're on All-American, we're talking hoops.
Whoops.
Football, done. It's over with.
That was a little dramatic.
I just hit the camera. That's unfortunate.
I'm going to place mine nicely over here. We still love you,
Uh-huh.
football, but
we do love you, football.
It's basketball season now.
It is hoop season. I'm all for college hoops. We're going to talk the women's game. We're going to talk the men's game. We're going to talk it all the next time we're on All-American. So be sure to stay tuned. We got some hoops to talk about. How about that, Maria? You all in?
I am all in on All-American Hoops version.
Let's do it. Let's do it. For Maria Trivelpiece, for Chris and Zach in the back, we thank you for joining us on the football version and the bowl review for All-American. We appreciate you all season long. Click subscribe. Be sure to follow. Hit that notification button as well, so that way anytime the American posts on YouTube, social media, or anything, you are up to date, because we've got some hoops to talk about. Lots has already happened in both the men's and women's game. We'll talk about it next. I'm Kyle Youmans saying so long from Studio A. We'll see you next time on All-American.